everyone. Welcome back to Intro to Tech Skills right here at Microsoft Build. I am one of your co-hosts, Gwyneth. I have Salman here with me as well. And we are on to our next session. Again, we've got our fantastic map showing us that we're at day one here. And with this session, you're actually going to take that first step to stamp your passport by creating and having a GitHub account ready. Salman, why do they need a GitHub account for this one?
Yeah, so with this session, you're going to really have an interactive session where you're going to be using GitHub and the amazing Visual Studio Code tool that is actually a way that developers create their amazing programs, not only at Microsoft, but other companies too. And we're going to have a peek into the developers toolkit with this session.
Exactly. And if you pick up anything you want to share, be sure to use the hashtags, hashtag MSBuild and hashtag Intro to Tech Skills, so we can potentially give you a shout out. Now, we have fantastic speakers for this session. We have Burke, Microsoft Cloud Developer Advocate, and Sana, who is a product manager right here at Microsoft. Salman, what can they expect to learn from this session?
Yeah, so you're going to be able to learn how you can use these amazing tools, how you can interact with the developer community and use these amazing extensions. And hey, no one needs to have any background in tech, right, with these sessions. So all of these sessions, you're going to really enjoy it and you can take it to the next level. And don't forget, try to do this stuff along the way with the demonstrations they're showing.
Exactly. And now it is time to welcome and hand off to our first speaker here, Burke.
Hello, everybody. How are you? Welcome to this session, a peek inside the developer toolkit. We're so glad you're here, whether it's Tuesday here or Wednesday, wherever you are. If you live out there in the future, welcome. We're glad you're here. My name is Burke, and this is my colleague and BFF, Sana.
Thanks, bestie. Hi, everyone. I'm Sana. I'm a product manager on the team, and I work with Burke, who is a developer advocate. And as you can see, we are very active on TikTok. We not to brag or anything, but we love making TikToks. That's like the best part of our jobs. No, I'm kidding. But we will, as a shameless plug, tell you to come follow VS Code on TikTok. We promise not to infiltrate your FYPs, but instead we promise to send you some good coding tips, share some things about programming fun facts you might not have known about, maybe show you how to build some apps. We're having good fun on TikTok. And if you refuse to download TikTok, like some people I know, we're also on YouTube and posting the same stuff as YouTube Shorts. So whatever your thing is, you'll be good.
Yes, and if you take nothing else away from this session, take this URL right here. It's the most important thing. And yes, I know it's kind of crazy that we're on TikTok professionally, but hey, what can I say? All right, who are we? Why are we here? Well, we're developers, or we're learning to be a developer, or we want to be a developer, or we're just curious about what a developer does. No matter who you are, you're welcome here. We're glad you're here. And listen, anybody can be a developer. And I just made a TikTok on how your brain is the ultimate coding machine, even if you're not a programmer already. So that's just another reason for you to subscribe, for you to follow us on TikTok. All right, enough shameless promotion. What do developers do all day? Seems like an obvious question with an obvious answer. The answer is, well, they write code. And by the way, this is an old programming joke. If you get this joke, drop it into the chat so that everybody else can join in. And if you're a Python person, you'll know why this joke doesn't work in Python. You can drop that in the chat as well. But yes, we write code, right? That's the obvious answer. Obviously, we write code. Okay, that is true. But I have a question for you. And the question is this. How many lines of code does the average developer write every day? And when I say average developer, I don't mean a developer of average skill. Okay, that would be me. I just mean of all the developers in the world, writing code was the average number that you get to write every day as a developer. Most people would guess in the hundreds, maybe thousands, right? Like if you're one of those, what do they call them, like 10x developers or lead code developers, whatever that means, thousands of lines of code. But the number is actually more like between 20 and 50, right? 20 lines of code is not a lot of code. So goodness gracious, if you're only writing between 20 and 50 lines of code as a developer, what on earth are you doing with the rest of your time? Well, obviously you're on TikTok, subscribe to the VS Code YouTube channel. But aside from that, what are you doing during your workday when you're not writing code and you're not on TikTok?
So we can kind of break up what developers do for the majority of their day into three major buckets. The first one is reading code, and that's a big part of what you do as a developer. Often you're put into a new project where there's already all these lines of existing code and you have to read through and make sure you understand them. Maybe you're entering an existing project and it's years long old and you forgot old code that you once wrote. But a lot of what you're doing is reading code and understanding what the behavior of that code is. The second thing you're probably doing is also writing code, like Burke mentioned. So this is like writing new lines of code that have new functionality or new behavior. And this is what you want to do as a developer for the most part. If you can do that all day, that's probably like your best bet, what you want to do all day. The third thing that you can do as a developer is maintain code. So this is things like fixing bugs in your code or improving the quality of your code, or maybe changing the internals of the code, but the behavior of the code stays the same. So as a developer, these are like what the three buckets end up being. And you'd be surprised to see how they actually break up into the time component. So you might actually spend way more of your day reading and maintaining code than you are actually writing code, which is what you really want to be doing. If you're really only spending 10% of your day writing new code, how can we make that better? How can we make that a larger part of your day and reduce the other things like reading and maintaining that are so much more overhead and give you some of that time back? So we're going to talk about the tools that you can use to give you more of that time back and save you time on reading and maintaining your code.
Right. So when we take a look inside the developer toolbox, there is just a ton of stuff in there. Excuse me. We've got GitHub, Visual Studio Code, we've got Docker, we've got containers, we've got all kinds of stuff, and it can get super overwhelming. So here's what we're going to do. Okay. We're going to put all that stuff back in. Okay. And instead, everything we're going to do today, we're going to do right on GitHub. Okay. So you can think of that today, GitHub and Visual Studio Code as your developer toolbox, but we're going to do a ton of stuff with it. Some stuff you probably didn't even know was possible. So with that, let's take a look at the developer toolkit, a peek inside the developer toolkit. So hopefully you've gone on and created a GitHub account. If you haven't done that, you should do that right after you follow us on TikTok. That's VS Code on TikTok. Did we mention that? Do we say anything about that?
Yeah, I think we have.
All right. So you'll want to create that GitHub account. And when you do that, you'll get your own sort of spot on GitHub. Now, what is GitHub exactly? If you don't know, you can think about GitHub as like a place to put your code in the cloud. It's like a backup for your code in its simplest form. It's kind of like your pictures on your phone, right? They get backed up to the cloud. The code you write, you want to back it up to the cloud somewhere. But it's a lot more than that. It's also a social coding experience, right? Everybody sort of has a spot on GitHub. You can see I have github.com/Burke Holland here. These are my repositories. Some of them are public, some of them are private. This is my contribution graph so that everybody can see the days that I'm not doing. I guess I'm reading a lot of code on these days. I don't know. I'm not making a lot of commits. I'm making TikToks, by the way. And so this is what this looks like. And you can kind of customize this to a degree, where you work, where you live. Some pithy saying here that you think is witty and then regret because it's now on a session for lots of people. But you can do a lot more with this, okay? Just have to know a secret. So let me give you an example of this. So this is Mish Manners. She works at GitHub. And when you come to her profile page, it looks a lot better, okay? She's got this like custom GIF that someone made. And you know it's a GIF because it's like sort of subtly moving here with the lights, which is really cool. She's got places you can find her around the web. She's a gamer. Does she play Overwatch? I don't see Overwatch in here. No, it's right there. That's the BattleNet logo, I believe. All right, sweet. To play Overwatch with Mish Manners. Anyway, places where you can read, watch, and catch up on her content. Scroll down, just visualizing her commit chart here. Even this, like, there's a snake down here eating the commit graph. Okay, so the point is, like, you can throw a lot of really cool stuff up here, and you're going to want to do this. How do you do this? All right, so this is how you do that. What you need to do is you need to create a new repository. So if you haven't done that, it's a great time to do so. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can do this on GitHub. One of the ways is you can just come to this little plus up here in the top right-hand corner, click that, and say new repository. But here's the thing. We're developers, right? So we're not going to click on that. We're going to do things the hard way. And GitHub, by the way, if you didn't know, has this little jump menu. If you press Control on Windows or Command on a Mac and K, you get this little jump menu on GitHub. A lot of people don't know that this exists. I didn't until like a couple of weeks ago, if I'm being completely honest. And you can do a lot of things here, right? So you can jump around GitHub really quickly here. But if you do a right caret here like this, you can run specific commands. And you can do a lot of stuff on GitHub. So, you know, you can create a new repository, which we're going to do. We can even do things like switching the theme, okay? And then we're going to set that to the, let's say, dark dimmed. Perfectly, I have a dark theme. Now I am a real developer. All right, so let's bring that menu up again. Little right caret action there. I don't know, is that a right caret? What's the name of this? We'll just call it the right arrow. Somebody put in the chat what the name of this is. All right. We're just like new repository. And then what we need to do is we need to give this repository a special name. So I'm going to select the right organization. You probably will only see your own account in that list. I have a bunch. And then what you need to do is give this repository the same name, the exact same name as your GitHub username. And then you want to make it public, right? And then you want to add a README file. That's important, right? Everybody still with me? We're going to create this repository. And when we do this, you can see that we get some text in here. It says, hi there. Okay, so GitHub added this for us. If we go back to my page, we'll now see that it says, hi there. Okay, so let's open up our little thing here and jump back to our my profile, and then we can edit this by clicking this little pen here. And this is cool. There's a sort of like a preview, and we can make some changes here, and then we can preview them over here. But there's a better way. Let me show you. So from the repository, any repository on GitHub, you can press the dot key on your keyboard. Okay, it doesn't say that anywhere on the page. You just have to know this is the kind of value we're bringing you in this session. And what you get is Visual Studio Code running in your browser. You don't have to install anything, it's just there. Visual Studio Code is a code editor, right? And so you can see we have all the files in the repo on the left, which is just one right now. And then we have a side-by-side preview. And then as we add updates, they will appear on the right-hand side. So a very nice way to edit your Markdown so that you can write it as you preview it. All right, so what can we do here? Well, we can do actually quite a lot. So one of the things we can do is we can pull up the Mac Finder window. There we go. And I'm going to take this folder, and we can actually drag this into Visual Studio Code running here. Even though it's in the browser, doesn't matter, drag and drop it in, just like you would on a desktop. And then, I don't know if you know this, but you can mix Markdown and HTML, right? So this is Markdown. This is kind of Markdown, and then this is obviously HTML, and this is definitely HTML. And you can't use CSS in these special GitHub READMEs, but you can do things like aligning the div to the center, adding images, and various things. So we've got this. We want to save this to our repository. So to do that, we're going to click the plus button, which just stages all these files. Basically says, all right, I'm ready to save it. And then we usually do something like initial commit. Sounds fancy, just something we normally say. And then we'll hit the check mark here, and this will actually save all this back to GitHub. So what does that do for us? Well, let's go back to our repository, and boom, right? Now we have a customized experience. And when people come to my page here, they will see this, me contemplating and staring at my favorite TikToks. So yeah, that's how we customize our page. Now, the cool thing about GitHub is that you can host not just your profile here, but you can host all kinds of stuff. So you can do things like hosting your blog, which I'm doing here. This is built with something called Hugo, runs on Go. It's compiled, it's advanced. GitHub can do that. You can also do things that are kind of like the most developer thing I can think of, which is to put your resume on GitHub. What is more developer than when they say, hey, can I see your resume? And you send them a link to something on GitHub. Screams developer, right? And if they say, I need a hard copy, you say, hey, just do Command or Control P and save it as a PDF, right? It's 2022. Awesome. And by the way, if you want to learn how to do this, they're going to do this in the next session. They're going to teach you how to make a resume and put it on GitHub using just GitHub. So you definitely want to stick around for that.
All right, cool. So Burke, I'm going to talk about how, like, now that you showed us github.dev, you showed us some of the GitHub tips, how can we do this with a more complicated project? So we've been working on this project called ilovelamp.fun. So I encourage all of you to go right now to this website, www.ilovelamp.fun. And if you notice, there's actually a lamp behind Burke, and this site allows you to control the colors of that lamp. So once you've signed in, you can click on this and it's a color scale and you can actually change the color, and we can have Burke live in like a kaleidoscope because everyone can start changing the colors behind him. So I just changed it to green. Feel free to continue changing it throughout the session, and let's annoy Burke a lot. But anyway, this is the project that Burke and I have been working on. It's been fun, but we're going to actually try to edit this a little bit further. So let's view this project on GitHub. So like Burke mentioned, right now I could open up github.dev, and this would allow me to work on this project and like continue to edit it like we just did. But instead, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to create a fork of this project. So if you click on this button here, this allows you to have a fork. And a fork is essentially a version of that project for yourself. So for instance, you can see that this is a project under Burke Holland. I've already created the fork. So once I create the fork, you can see that now this project is under my name, and it's the same project. It's forked from Burke, and this is just my version. So I can make my edits and my changes to this version, and then I can send them to Burke to review if he wants to add it to the real deal. So we're going to open this project inside something called a code space. So I could have opened this inside github.dev like Burke just showed, but instead we're going to open it inside of a code space because that's going to allow us to run this project. So I've already opened this and created the code space. So this is the code space, and it looks very similar to what Burke just did with github.dev. Very much the similar thing. In fact, if I go back up here and actually press the dot, we can compare them side by side. So you can see here that we're opening up github.dev. It looks very similar to the code space I just showed you. There's a couple of differences. For instance, if I want to run this app, I have to use the terminal to make sure I have installed all of these different tools in here. So if I open up the terminal.
Advocate of Microsoft. Today we have a special series of special guests who will be talking about a series of programs.
So there's a terminal that you can see here that allows you to continue working on. So instead of, there's no terminal in github.dev, but instead I'm going to continue working on a code space. And this will allow me to create a code space, and I already got one. So let's open that up in here.
Hi, I'm Jasmine.
So again, it looks very similar
a bunch of special guests today
to a code space. And now I'm going to use the terminal over here. So now I have this terminal, and that's the main difference between the github.dev and the code space. So now we can make sure that in this terminal, I have all of these things I need to run this project. So we can make sure that we have the right version of Node. We can make sure that we have other things in here too. I think we have Python in here. So again, this code space is different from the github.dev because now we have all the things necessary for us to run this project, like all the compilers, debuggers, all the different libraries in our code that we need. So now that you have all that running inside of a code space, the next thing we're going to do is try to make sense of this. I don't really know where some of the parts of this code is, but luckily Burke has added something called the code tour in here. And that you can see is inside this .tor folder. We have an extension in VS Code called CodeTor. And CodeTor allows us to essentially take a tour of this entire repository. So once you have the folder open, you can click on this pane over here and start the CodeTor. So this CodeTor has 6 different steps. It's going to take us through the content of this project and give us a much better idea and let us actually hear from Burke about what the different files do. So I don't have to necessarily look through all the lines of code in this file. So we can come here and say that the first step here is introducing us to the front end and the API of this code. That's good to know. We can move on to the next step. The next step here is telling us that this is the JavaScript file for the front end. This is just vanilla JavaScript, no other libraries or frameworks. Good to know. Next step. This is where the CSS is, or the style and decor of the website. Good to know. This is the API. This is what connects us to the actual lamp behind Burke. This is a lot of the, again, more about the lamp and how we can access the color inside the lamp and the bulb. And then this is something to do with Azure and the way it's hosted. So this gives me a much better idea of like where things are in the code. And now I don't have to spend so much of that time I would have just trying to make sense of where all the files are and how this file relates to that file. So we saved a lot of time with that CodeTor. All right, so if we go back to the website, I noticed that when we got to the beginning of the website, you can't really see the bulb over here because it's a white background. So you have to change the color in order to see the bulb. So let's actually add a background here so that we can now see the bulb. So I think that's what we're going to want to do. But I think we have to do that in the style.css because that's controlling the style and decoration. But I'm not really sure exactly what we have to do just yet. So I'm going to invite Burke into my code space. So we're going to use an extension called Live Share. And if you search for that, that's going to allow us to directly collaborate together in real time and have fun. This has been a great lifesaver for us while we've been working remotely. So I'm going to log in with my GitHub account, which I've already done. And now I'm going to share a session with Burke. This is going to give me a link that I can open up and share with Burke. And he can join from any different VS Code. He can join from his desktop. He can join from his browser. He can join from vscode.dev, github.dev. All right, so I'm going to copy this link and send it to Burke. And then he's going to be able to enter my code space and we are going to be able to work together. So Burke, what are you seeing on your end?
So on my end, I clicked on the link and it's pulled up VS Code in the browser for me, and it's asking me to sign in. But by the way, I can choose my own name apparently. So here I come.
All right, FYP Burke, you're infiltrating my FYP, man.
I am. All right. All right. So I see your project, and let's see here. Are you following me? It looks like you are.
So you can right click and follow you.
All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go into the front end and I'm going to open these styles.css. All right, and then here, what most people do in a live share session is they just start talking to each other just like this. It feels like the right thing to do, right? Or they're dropping in some emojis. I don't know, whatever it is that you want to do. But we actually want to do real work here, folks. We don't mess around with emojis. So I think what we need here, Sana, I think, is an HTML element. You want to style that. And then there's a body element and you want to style that as well.
Okay, so luckily I think I know what to do now. I have a handy piece of code that I can copy and paste in here.
What a coincidence.
I did notice. Yeah, I noticed you have a background conveniently already in here. So that's great. We're going to put that in the HTML, and then we're going to put the background in the body. All right. And just let me make sure I copy that. All right. Cool. So I think this should work now. I'm going to open up the terminal. All right, and in the terminal, we can check out a couple things. So there's actually a the code space automatically forwards a port, which means that I can test what the change I just made locally is. So I can go ahead and open this up locally. And this is going to give us a kind of a preview of what to expect.
Oh, those forwarded ports.
Forwarded ports, man.
And so this is like the equivalent of basically accessing localhost on your own machine, if you're familiar with doing that, where you can actually get to the application even though it's running in a browser, because you're not running locally, you're running in the browser. And so you can see here, she's got the functions app up and running, and then having a little trouble with the front end. The demo gods do not approve of this message.
Right.
There we go. All right.
Got it. Had to try a couple times, but all right. So this is the change that we just made. We added the background, right? And we can test it out locally. And the code space, again, we don't have to do a lot of that setup and maintenance that we would have to have done with a local environment. Like I can just test this out. So I think it looks decent, Burke.
Well, I don't know, chat. I see a problem. Do you see a problem? I think I see a problem.
Yeah, I see a little problem.
I see a problem. So this is the great thing about live share, right? Is that when you have a problem like the one that we've just seen, if you want to toggle back there, Sana, is that this problem is kind of specific and hard to describe, right? So do you see the background? Yes, I see the background, but the top part of it's like kind of whitish and the bottom part's clear, and like it's so instead of having to explain that when we live share, we can just get in and try to fix this together. So I think I know what to do here, Sana. I think I just need to change the background to also have 100% height. So I'm gonna go ahead and save that for you, and if you could just check it out and see if that worked.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to open up the dev tools and just refresh this. And all right, that's great. All right,
there
that looks a lot better. Thanks.
Beautiful.
Okay, cool. So now that we worked on that change, again, we spent and saved so much more time being able to work on that together and being able to get the tour of the repository, being able to collaborate together, test out the changes locally. And now we can wrap it up with a bow and make sure we finish the deal. So I'm going to commit this into the fork that I made. So I'm going to update this and say add background. And now this is going to essentially keep track of my work and save my progress. I'm going to push this to my repository, my fork. And now I can do something called opening up a pull request. So we can go over to this GitHub tab over here, and this is going to allow me to create a pull request from my version of the project into Burke's version of the project, because that's where the website is hosted from. So I'm going to create a pull request by just pressing that button over there, and you can see what's happening, right? We're merging my change with the new background into Burke's version, and I'm just going to say this is adding the background, create this, and now we can send it over to Burke to review and actually add it into his version.
All right, so there's nothing like getting a pull request. I love it. It's awesome. All right, and how do I know I have one? Well, in GitHub we have notifications. You can see there's a lot of these, and they can get kind of a lot, especially if you work on a lot of open source projects. Talk to people who do a lot of open source dev. They will tell you about it. But in this case, we can see that I've got a pull request here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I can see that she's submitted it. I can see the commit. Everything looks good. Beyond that, I was part of the change. So I'm just going to go ahead and merge this pull request and confirm the merge. And we can do that right here from within GitHub, right? There's no reason for us to go back to the code to perform this merge because GitHub can do this for us. So we've done this. And now that we've done this, if we come over here to this tab here, you'll see this says actions. And what's actually happening here is GitHub is now building the code and it's going to deploy it to the live site. So if I click into this, you can see there's this build and deploy job that's running. So it's going to build it and it's going to deploy it here as the final step. Now, This is more advanced stuff. This is called GitHub Actions. And so what we've seen so far is that not only can you host code on GitHub, you can write code using VS Code in GitHub, you can run the code using code spaces, and you can even build and deploy the code as you're seeing right here. And so this is called GitHub Actions, another session for another day, but all of this powered by Azure Static Web Apps, which you can also check out on your own. But in just a second here, this should be merged and you'll see the changes updated on the live site. So what did we see today? We saw about setting up your GitHub profile, right? You're going to create that README on your profile. You're going to customize that with your own special GIF or what have you, a snake eating your commit chart. You're going to stick around for the next session where you're going to make a resume on github.dev and deploy that. Super powerful stuff. Nothing more developer than having your resume hosted on GitHub. So remember, there's a lot of tools out there, but GitHub plus VS Code really is the developer's toolbox. And with that, thank you so much for joining us and being with us. I think we can do a little Q&A.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Oh no, we can't. Now we can't hear the hosts. We can hear the hosts a little bit during the session. Now we can't hear them. Look, this is live fun, y'all. We're doing it live. On Teams, they're muted. Hold on, can I unmute them? Do I have the power? No, I don't. I tried. Let's see. I wonder if is the live site updated with the new background? I feel like this is going to push this app over the line, and we're going to be able to. Oh yeah,
Woo!
it's there.
Look at that.
Beautiful.
Wait, can you hear us?
You did?
Yes,
Okay.
we can. Hey, what's up?
Awesome. We're really enjoying your session, Burke and Sana, so thank you so much. Hey, it's so cool that you can just go onto GitHub and customize so many things, like having HTML in your README. Isn't that so cool?
Exactly.
Yeah, so hey, just as Burke mentioned, we have time for some Q&A. And the first question we're going to go over is, hey, we've been showcased Visual Studio Code. What's the difference between Visual Studio Code that Microsoft makes and also Visual Studio? Could I direct that to you, Bert?
Sure, absolutely. And in fact, I'm going to bounce it over to Sana because she's a PM on the VS Code team, and I think she can probably answer this better than I can.
Yeah, thanks, Burke. So that's a good question. I think that's something that a lot of people, when they're starting off, get confused. Even people who are like very experienced actually get confused with this one. We could have named them a little bit more distinctly, but essentially, Visual Studio Code is a text editor. So it's more of like a notepad that has some extra features and capabilities. And Visual Studio is more of an integrated development environment, or it stands for IDE. But that's a much more powerful code editor, and it has more things like, special wizards and special like project systems that can help you with more of like a more advanced project. If you're looking to just get started, I would recommend starting off with VS Code, and then if you need a more advanced editor, try out Visual Studio.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that answer. We have a couple more questions here, and since we got some experts with us, why not keep going with them? I have a fun one here for both of you, actually. Outside of the extensions, the VS Code extensions that you showcased during this session, what are some of your favorites and what do they do?
Oh, goodness. What a question. What a great question that was. My favorite VS Code extensions, look, like children, all VS Code extensions aren't my favorite, but there are some of them that I tend to get along with more than others. So I'm going to say I really like Git Lens. It's super helpful as you work more and more with source control. It can get very complicated. Okay, so look, if you're working with Git and you're trying to work with Git and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, it's okay. I'm 43 and I don't know what I'm doing. And I've been using it for like 10 years. And so it just makes it more visual, and it's easier to, point and click and do things from the editor. You saw some of it in Sana's, she has it installed. Out to the side, it had my name. If you were watching, that Burke Holland wrote this line, that's Gitlins providing that. Some of the other ones I like that are kind of cool. There's one called Music Time that allows you to put
Burke,
your.
you stole mine.
Oh gosh, dang it!
You stole mine. That's my favorite.
It lets you put your Spotify playlist inside of VS Code. You can control it from there. There's another one called Thunder Client that allows you to do API testing from within Visual Studio Code. And then there's one called Simple React Snippets, which is probably the greatest extension ever made for VS Code. You might guess who the author is. I don't know. Sana, what are yours?
Yeah, I was gonna say the music time extension is one of my favorite. I love that a lot. And I think a really fun one that I get a kick out of every single time is one called Power Mode. And like Burke mentioned, like about being a 10x developer, if you really want to like code and like put some emphasis on it, you can use this extension to like add fire to your cursor every time you code, because we know that your code is fire.
Wow, that is so incredible. I didn't know there were so many cool extensions on Visual Studio Code.
There's so many great extensions. Listen, you can order pizza with VS Code. I'm not joking. There's an extension for, yes. There's
you're going to have to share that with me after. And there's this interesting concept in the productivity space called temptation bundling. So like mixing this in with extensions is going to be a whole new thing I'm exploring soon. I think we have time for just one more question. And hey, this GitHub dev thing you're showing where you press the period key and you have this VS Code editor in the browser? Can you use that on a tablet as well?
So that is a great question. Yes. And in fact, it works on an iPad. I've used it myself. I have an iPad Pro as sort of like my lightweight machine. I'm going to bounce this to Sana, though, who's going to know more about this than I do.
Yeah, but yeah, Burke's right. It works from any browser. So in fact, if you like have a browser on your watch or like on your phone or like anything, you can be able to do things on the fly. I think the main use case for doing something from your phone or an iPad or Surface or whatever tablet you're using is being able to just quickly things and review things on the fly. So for instance, you could be like waiting in the doctor's office and get a pull request like Burke just got and be able to review it on your phone from github.dev. And so that makes it just really convenient to access it from mostly any device that you can think of.
That's awesome. Before we do end, I want to sneak in one more just for myself. And I know you mentioned a little bit about GitHub Actions. Is there perhaps a little bit more that you can tell us about what actually GitHub Actions is?
Yeah, so let me try my best there. So GitHub Actions is what you'll hear people refer to as CI/CD, if you've ever heard people use that terminology, or continuous integration, continuous delivery. And the idea is that when you push your code into GitHub, what you really want to happen is your main branch is your production code. So wouldn't it be great if by the time you push to your main branch, GitHub just went ahead and built that for you on its servers and then pushed it to wherever you run your code? Wouldn't that be nice? That's what
you have many agents doing this for you?
Yes, exactly. So that's what GitHub Actions does, right? And then there's a special configuration file that's in my project, and actually Azure sets all of this up for you, right? You just tell Azure, hey, take the code from here, deploy it over here. That's it. That's really the magic of Azure static web apps that you see at work there with the GitHub Actions.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think that's it for our session here with Burke and Sana. Join us in our next session, and we'll see you there.
Any last words, Burke or Sana, before we sign off?
I would say go to any GitHub repo and press the doc key and see what happens, and see how you can edit the code so quickly and easily. And then do the README. I really think that's a really cool way to get your hands a little dirty with using Markdown and understanding what a GitHub repository is without really messing anything up. So that's definitely my recommendation.
And I would just say, in case we haven't mentioned it, follow us on TikTok. at VS Code or youtube.com/code. Let us see there. We post videos on extensions, cool extensions that we find all the time. So it's a great way to stay up to date on the latest.
Awesome. Thank you so much, team. This has been great. For everyone in the audience, stick with us here at Intro to Tech Skills. We have so much more. Co-hosts are going to be here the entire time. We'll see you in the next one.